My friend Carrie gave me this book on Sunday, and I'm only about halfway through it, but it is the amazing story of Father Walter Ciszek, a Jesuit priest who was born in Shenandoah, Pennsylvania, and he was serving a church in Poland when World War II broke out, and he was captured by the Russian army, was convicted of being a Vatican spy, and he spent the next 23 years in Soviet prisons, solitary confinement, and finally in the labor camps of Siberia. And he was later released to America in a prisoner exchange program, to the amazement of his friends and families who had presumed he had died decades before. What is extraordinary about Father Ciszek's journey of faith is that he came to understand God's will as what is happening right now, what is happening right in front of us. Not something big that we have to wait for, not some big mysterious thing that we have to prepare ourselves for. It's just what happens day by day. He came to understand that as God's will, whether that be in a freezing, crowded train full of prisoners, in a solitary prison cell, in a salt mine, or digging in the frozen Siberian tundra. So loneliness, pain, fear, and despair, this eventually gave way to a deep sense of peace, which he called a total surrender to God. As I said, I haven't finished this book yet, but when I was looking for a prayer for this week, I was absolutely sure that this was the right prayer, taken from his memoirs, and it's called A Prayer of Surrender. And I really didn't have a plan for the video when I started filming the sunset on Monday evening, but it was not until I started assembling the videos and adding the prayer text that I noticed how well it all followed, how well the words followed the video and how the video followed the words so well. And in the clouds, if you notice, it looks to me anyway like there is a face. It looks like eyes. First, sad eyes, and then angry eyes, and then by the end, you see eyes peacefully sleeping. And little things like what a difference it makes to put a little bit of light on the inside of an old hedge post, an old fence post made out of hedge. And then there's a tangle of barbed wire that really looks a lot like a crown of thorns. There's a single drinking cup hanging from the windmill, and that reminded me of Jesus' prayer in the Garden of Gethsemane, which Father Ciszek mentions many times in his book. Matthew 26:39, Jesus prays, "My Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me, yet not as I will, but you will." The idea for the musical reflection part came after the video was already put together, the prayer was already edited in. I thought of this steady one-note anchor. It's the note A. This is the note that an orchestra uses when they're tuning before performance. Also, 60 a minute is how fast it goes, because 60 beats a minute is how many heartbeats an average adult human being has when they're resting. So heart rate of a resting human being, 60 beats a minute. So the first thing I did was to record 270 of the note A. And this represents God's will, which is steady and unchanging. Then the first part is in a minor mode, because I think we tend to think of minor mode as being sad, and Father Ciszek talks about his sadness. And so it starts off very... And I think when we talk about someone following God's will, a lot of times we think, ooh, following God's will, that's big and scary and kind of sad and important and selfless and involves a lot of suffering. And it's not necessarily so. Most of the time when we suffer, when we're doing God's will, the suffering is caused by other people. And that certainly is true in Father Ciszek's case. His personal suffering, his physical suffering, it had nothing to do with following God's will. It had everything to do with people causing him physical pain. If everyone did God's will, then there would be much less suffering in the world. And when there is suffering, it would be tended with such beautiful mercy that our whole world would be transformed. So when the prayer goes from talking about feeling sad to surrendering to God's will, the music goes from being in a minor key to a major key, to A major. And that was way harder to write than the sad stuff, which my ego as a composer got in the way. My composer's pride, where I think I need to write profound music. I need to write, it's minor key, therefore it's more valuable. It can't be happy or people will think I'm shallow. So me, all about pride. And there's one progression that I tried to avoid. We're going from A major to D major. It's a feel-good, almost cliche chord progression. But when I tried to avoid it, I got a writer's block. So I went with it. I went ahead and used it. And when I put it in the prayer, it coincided exactly with that line about God's will. So it's in there. I hope you find this prayer as spiritually nourishing as I have. And I want to say thank you to Carrie for this wonderful book, introducing me to Father Ciszek, who died in 1984, but he is now being investigated for possible canonization as a saint in the Roman Catholic Church. So, thanks for watching. God bless you. We'll see you next week.